So eventually, after a lot of back and forth, I managed to get access to really good data. And I was, again, the first person to do that here.
Obviously, we're here today to talk about road safety. I think that's obviously a very, very important topic, especially for me as someone who has a teenager who's about to get on the road soon.
So we'd won basically something called the Queen's Anniversary Prize for Higher Education for the work that we do in traffic safety. The way a car crashes is one thing, but then the way the human body gets injured is another thing completely. It's an interesting city to drive in, definitely, and you need to give yourself time to adjust to it, because driving here is not like anywhere else. I've driven in Germany, I've driven in the US, in the UK.
You've launched Road Hero Academy. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you felt that was necessary? Dr. Mustafa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
What does freedom mean to you?
And freedom, my concepts have been changing a lot lately. And I think now it's about being at peace with time. So if you've got the time to, do your things, what your priorities are, and then you make peace with the times that you don't think you've got, everything's going your way or the way you imagine they would be, then I think that's kind of freedom to me. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Obviously, we're here today to talk about road safety. Mm-hmm. I think that's obviously a very, very important topic, especially for me as someone who has a teenager who's about to get on the road soon. But before I do, just want to kind of go back to your life growing up. I know even though you lived in Dubai, you've also been in the UK for 14 years.
Yes.
So
yes.
How would you describe your life growing up?
I was born and raised here in Dubai. I've seen Dubai go from, Sheikh Zayed Road was like 2 lanes to Abu Dhabi. It was very simple.
Yeah.
And now it's, yes, we got 6 to 8 lanes. But when I was 19, I left Dubai to go and study in the UK, a little town called Loughborough in the East Midlands near Leicester and Nottingham. Away from London, fortunately not in a big city. But I think the smaller towns and areas, the countryside is very nice in the UK, especially in the summer. So the idea was to do a 3-year degree in automotive materials engineering. So I really liked cars. I had changed my first flat tire when I was about 12 years old. We were going off-road and we had a flat tire. My father was like, do you want to have a go? So he supervised and I did most of the work, and I was glad to see it wasn't so hard. And so I thought I'd study something interesting at university. And while I was studying, again, the opportunity for a placement came up, because in the UK system, you can do a year out between the second and third years. So I took that, and that opened up the opportunity, because I did the placement at a safety research center that belonged to the university. It was like off campus, but it was part of the, owned by the university. So that year of placement led to my PhD. So at the end of my degree, my first degree, the research center reached out and said, listen, Mustafa, we've got a new PhD program opening up. We're looking for good students. We know you from your work here as a placement student. Do you want to apply? So I'm like, what's another 3 years in theory? But yeah, the 3 years actually took 6. So it wasn't as short a PhD as I thought. But again, it's all these things happen for a reason. It was I learned a lot, because it's a big jump to go from a bachelor's direct to a PhD. I didn't do a master's degree, and but that was again with the support of that research center. I changed the subject of my thesis once, which is again, it's like a reset. You have to kind of start all over again, because initially I was working on traffic safety in the UK, and that was going to be the subject of my thesis. But then I thought, the UK has already got a lot of research going on, a lot of funding that goes towards traffic research, but in Dubai we haven't got much of that. So I thought, why am I doing it about the UK? Let me do it about the UAE. And so I changed tack. I was supported by the institute again, insofar as they guide me, I guess, in getting the data and searching for data. But they said, we don't have any data on Dubai. You have to go down there on the ground and search for it yourself. So that was what I did. There was lots of knocking on doors, taking an official letter from the university to show that I'm supported. I'm actually doing a PhD. I'm not just a random person off the street trying to gain access to sensitive, crash data. So eventually, after a lot of back and forth, I managed to get access to really good data. And I was again the first person to do that here. And that began basically my networking in the UAE, because I'm very familiar now with local government departments and how they work. And it started when I was a student back in 22 years old, knocking on doors and trying to get my hands on some data, basically. Yeah.
Nice. And I also saw that you met the Queen at that time. Was that also through knocking on doors?
The Queen was an amazing opportunity that came through the PhD. So I was a PhD student in the last maybe year or two of my PhD, around 2008, when the research center I was in. So we'd won basically something called the Queen's Anniversary Prize for Higher Education for the work that we do in traffic safety, because that center has been going more than 20 years, and they're known, around the world for their research. So they opened up the floor for research students to join the award ceremony in Buckingham Palace in London. So I put my name in. I didn't think much of it. I think, there's no way they'll pick the one, let's say, minority student to go and attend. But funnily enough, they picked me. So I got to go, and it happened on the 14th of February, which happens to be my birthday as well. So I'm like, I couldn't have planned this better if I tried, So I got to meet the Queen on my birthday. She came to our stand. She shook hands with us, and her late husband was there as well. He came before her. We got all the protocol people explaining to us what to do, what not to do. So it was a really nice experience. I got some really good pictures out of that. Yes.
Okay, amazing. All right. So you went from being a car enthusiast to being on the forefront of road safety. What sparked that shift?
So growing up in Dubai, again, Dubai had opened up to wealth back in the 80s. So we had, we were a new, oil nation. The UAE was growing up and growing, opening up to the world. So at my school, there was signs of that wealth. So in the school car park, there were already 18-year-olds who were driving some fancy cars. We had a guy who had a BMW 750 IL, which back at the time was the top of the range BM. We had another school mate who had a Porsche 911. It was, I remember, a bright red Porsche 911 Turbo, used to park in the school car park. And I was like 14, 15 at the time, and that was kind of my aspiration. It was like a really, really amazing thing to see in your school. And then one day I was shocked that, they called us to attend funeral prayers at the school mosque. They're like, okay, studies are interrupted. All students go to the mosque and we're going to have funeral prayers. I'm like, they normally don't do that except in an emergency. So after, again, we were trying to find out who died. And it turns out to be the guy who owned the Porsche. So I'm like an 18-year-old student who had a very nice car. And who'd grown up here, and one day he's with you, you see him at school in the school corridors, and the next day he's not, and that left a big impression on me. It's a big thing when you lose someone, I guess, in that way. Even though we are not in the same class, we're not in the same age group, but still, it left an impression on the whole school. I think everything was a little more subdued after that, and it got me thinking, okay, how did it happen? Why did it happen? So I became very curious about crashes, and I think human beings generally have this curiosity around crashes, and you see the rubbernecking, you see people want to know what happened, find out, so I dived deep into that. I started obviously with the boring side, with books, reading all kinds of research I could get my hands on in the first few weeks of the internship that I had. And then it got to more exciting things like going out on the scene, investigating crashes and cars out on the roads or in scrapyards after the event. We also had like a crash course in hospital data and biomechanics, because the way a car crashes is one thing, but then the way the human body gets injured is another thing completely, because they say there's always like 2 or 3 stages to a crash. There's where the car hits a solid object, and then there's where the body is slowed down inside the car by hopefully the seat belt or airbag if you're belted. And then there's the third impact, is where your internal organs actually hit the inner side of your body as you slow down. So sometimes that's what causes the damage inside the body. So you need to really understand all these things to understand how people get injured, what the types of injuries are, why do car makers go around adding all these fancy things to their cars. And that was the start of it, and I've been curious about it ever since. And whenever I get anybody sitting in my car, especially if it's kids or the elderly, I kind of force them to wear a seatbelt, because I don't want to have anything to do with anybody not being safe in my car, basically.
Yeah. One question, and this is also something that's always made me curious, is that you see accidents all the time, right? Whether you're driving on the road or on TV or just through a friend, you know the importance of seatbelts and how they can perhaps save a life. You know the importance of not texting while driving, yet you see videos of people texting while they're driving and getting into accidents. What is it about the human psyche that just makes them feel like they're above and beyond those things that are happening to everybody else by not taking the right measures when it comes to driving safely?
Well, I think from observation, again, from looking at myself as well, I think human beings tend to, try it first in a small way. Like, let's say, they say, okay, I'll just check this text message, or I check this story on Instagram or something while I'm driving, and then nothing happens. And then the next time they do it, nothing happens. And then they think, maybe actually this is a safe thing to do. So it's a, slippery slope.
Absolutely.
Once it starts, people start to do more and more. You find people eating, you find people drinking and putting on their makeup, doing all kinds of things while driving. And the thing is, an accident is by its very name, an accident. It's a very rare event. It doesn't happen all the time. But the only reason it happens is someone slipped up. There's been one or more than one vehicle that's, one of them's made a mistake, the other one hasn't noticed or cannot correct or accommodate for that mistake, and it takes generally two people or two sides to have a crash. So by being distracted, by interrupting your attention with whatever it is, people think that, I can multitasking is a thing, but tell them, no, there's no way your brain, the human brain can only focus on one task at a time. This idea of multitasking, as soon as you add the second task, the amount of brain power that goes to the first task goes down dramatically. And this is why, studies have shown that people who are using the phone while driving, their attention, or they're driving as bad as people who are drunk or even worse. So it's really detrimental that you keep all your focus on the one task of driving. But I think when nothing happens the first time, the second time, the third time, people think that it's okay to do that. And again, there's maybe human beings, I think, need constant reminders. So having these continuous, whether it's campaigns, whether it's reminders in the car, whether it's, it takes discipline, basically. It's like the people who have, I don't know, maybe an amazing body. They didn't reach that level by occasionally going to the gym or occasionally watching what they eat, or, they follow a regimen and then they got to their amazing results. The same with people who run a marathon, people who do any kind of major achievement. So I think safe driving is a habit that people can discipline themselves into, and they've really got to be committed. And I'd rather people arrive to it in a happy way, in a safe way, rather than the bitter experience of having someone in their family or a loved one or a friend pass away. Because as it is right now in the UAE, we're sat here in Dubai, and I can tell you, most of the local families, there isn't, I think, a local family or tribe who hasn't lost someone in a crash. And that's really sad. But again, what's the effect of that? Can we actually use that to make sure that's the last fatality in that family ever? Because sometimes you hear of crashes where 2 or 3 people have died. And it's sad, definitely, because it's a loss of a human life. It's a loss of productivity. Somebody's got a long life ahead of them. But at the same time, it's preventable, and we've got one of the safest roads and records here in the UAE, but it can still be better. It can always be better. We've still got 100, 110 people die every year, and I think we can do better than that.
Yeah. To that point, as someone who's worked closely with the government here, and what are some of the big shifts or changes you've seen over the years that has enhanced the safety of the roads?
So we were one of the first Emirates here to apply speed cameras. So back in the early 2000s, Sheikh Zayed Road had just undergone an expansion. We'd gone to 3 lanes and then to 6 lanes, and it became a bit of a highway for speed. And they installed the first 6 cameras on Sheikh Zayed Road, and the effect was like overnight. It was immediate. People, back then, I mean, the fine was a little less than it is now. And we've had speeding fines go from 200 dirhams to 400 to 600. And now it keeps going up according to how much you're speeding. And it could lead up to, impound of the car and jail time as well. So we've seen cameras. I mean, we've now got more than 500 cameras all over the streets in Dubai, which is very high, because back when I was in the UK, I was told that there was about 3,000 cameras in the whole of the UK. But again, the UK is like, 60 million people. Right. So there's a big difference in population. Here, it's a much smaller place. So we've seen cameras go all over the place. We've seen different technologies. I mean, even things like SALIC. People might think of SALIC as a road pricing thing. It's kind of controlling the direction of traffic and so on. But actually, that also makes a contribution, because you notice people somehow drive very carefully under the SALIC gates. It's like everybody's tense, everybody's... and remember, there are also cameras in the SALIC gates, and there are also other ways. So people, it's a very small town, Dubai is. Even though we have 4 million people, it's still very easy to identify someone. It's very easy. You stick out like a sore thumb when you do something wrong, basically. So I really encourage people to stick to the law, to follow the rules, and also be patient, because we've got new bridges coming up. We've got new lanes being expanded. There's always continuous improvements here. So you've got to be on the lookout for what's happening on the roads, because the exit you used last week might not be there today. There might be a new bridge that's come up if you've gone a few weeks and come back to Dubai. So it's an interesting city to drive in, definitely. And you need to give yourself time to adjust to it, because driving here is not like anywhere else. I've driven in Germany, I've driven in the US, in the UK, and every city, every country has its own flavor when it comes to driving, and you need to give yourself time to adjust to it, to understand the local driving culture and become the safest driver that you can be.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Mustafa, you've also had access to a lot of insights, a lot of data. What would you say are some of the things that really surprised you in terms of accidents, and some of the things that you saw that just were pretty unusual that you can share with us?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, there's no end of fascination when it comes to accident investigation, because there's sometimes what the human beings do is fascinating. Sometimes what the cars do. Sometimes what happens on the roads is. So there's many instances, but I remember, one of the ones that stuck with me. So while I was in the UK, I used to attend, so the university, we had a research contract with the Department for Transport in the UK. They would have to go every year and cover a certain number of crashes, where they would collect really in-depth data. I'm talking like 10 or 20 pages worth of data on each vehicle, every human, so it was a lot of data fields. So one day we came on shift, and I would go as like an observer with them, because again, I was curious as to what happened. So one day we went, and I could see the guys in the room were excited, our police driver, the other investigators, and I'm like, what's going on? They're like, oh, there was a crash last night that happened, and there's a chance that it's still there this morning. I'm like, really? Oh, what are the chances of it? But they're like, it seems to be a big crash, and the road is still closed, and people are still on the scene. I'm like, wow, that must have been a big one to happen, in the darkness. And this was summertime. We're not talking winter. So, the British summers, the day is really long. So we really wanted to go and see that crash in the daytime. And so they checked with the control room, and they found out that, it's still on scene. You can actually attend, and it meets our criteria for attendance. So we went there, and we were shocked that the cars were not yet removed from the scene. So what had happened, it had one of these crazy instances where it's a dual carriageway. So you got cars going one direction and then the other direction, and they're separated by a barrier. And somehow something happened on one side of the road that got a car to flip and go over to the other side of the road and land on top of another car. So it's like the chances of this happening, if it was a stunt in Hollywood and someone wanted to choreograph it to the exact moment is nearly impossible. So how this happened, one car managed to land on top of another, going on the other opposite direction, is really crazy. And I think seeing again the effects of that crash, we were there for hours while the emergency services took the car. They were figuring out the safest way, because in the UK it's always about safety first. They don't have that urgency to open up a road as much as they do maybe in a place like Dubai. So they took their time figuring out how to get the two cars apart, and the coroner was there. It was they had to deal with the dead bodies that were there. So it was a very sobering thing, but also fascinating how these things happen. And there was no conclusive cause to the crash. They couldn't really find out exactly what happened. There was a theory about something flying, like a piece of tarpaulin or something flying in the road and obstructing the driver on the one side of the road, but there was no conclusive proof of that. So it's amazing that in one moment, 2 or 3 people could lose their lives, and in such a spectacular fashion. And then we need to, I guess, to learn the lessons from that. Maybe improve the barriers, improve this, improve that. Who knows what the condition of the drivers was while they were driving? Were they distracted? Were they drunk? Were they? So that's one of the most. That image sticks with me for a long time. Yeah.
Interesting. Is there a photo?
No.
I want to talk about driving cultures and the impact they have on the road. So, for example, obviously you grew up in the UK for some time. There's a driving culture there. UK for me is actually probably one of the few countries I don't think I can ever drive in, because of, like, I think I'd be confused at some point. And I'm sure a lot of people think the same.
Other direction.
It's the other direction.
On the other side
the roads, the roads are so tiny that I don't even know how people can fit through. I also grew up in the States, for example, where there aren't really any speed cameras, right? It's police officers, and if they get you, they might beat you up, especially if you look like me. So you're very careful. And then I've also seen a place like Egypt where there's a 3-lane road, but there's 12 cars side by side, and it's normal. So there's all these different cultures. And now here in the UAE, right, very multinational country, we have people from all over the world here coming with their own driving habits here. How can that be managed in a way that everybody can be accommodated and everybody can have that same safety policies, to follow?
I mean, it's interesting. I know that the UAE government has studied what they call ناربك رحلة المتعامل, or the journey of let's say, the person who's experiencing the UAE. So the moment you land in, say, Dubai International Airport, the government has actually looked at your journey and what happens as you go through immigration, you collect your bags, you get into the taxi. So we've actually looked at these things in depth. And I think when somebody lands in the UAE, from the first moment, there is an impression that, okay, there's an order here. There is a system here. Things are, you need to follow a certain, there are people queuing, there are cameras, there are people in uniform all around, there are people in kandoras, organizing things, there are people in high-vis jackets. So I think if you're an observant person, you notice that as you land into this country, this is an orderly country. This is a place where there are systems, and systems are followed, and generally they are open to obviously change and adjust to different circumstances, but generally the systems are there to be followed, and therefore everybody's safety and everybody's, it's the only way to run an efficient country in a way. So, and I think maybe we tend to have, some people, I know even I do this sometimes, you tend to have a Dr. Jekyll and Hyde or Mr. Jekyll and Hyde kind of personality dual thing. When you get behind the roads, behind the wheel sometimes, people's personalities change. They've got a driving personality, and they've got the regular human who interacts with other people off the road. So somehow when it's almost like the keyboard warrior perspective. When you're in the car, you somehow think you're anonymous, you're not identifiable, so you tend to do things that you might not do otherwise. So I think generally people behave well when they arrive, here in the roads. But generally some people, you can't help it if they've been driving in a certain way in their own country for a long time, and then they get behind the wheel of a car here. It takes a while for them to adjust. There's some corrective, let's say, actions that happen as you're driving. So they might notice, hey, why are people staring at me? Oh, is it not normal to cut off a long line of traffic? Or why are people beeping at me? Why are people flashing at me? The observant people will kind of get thinking, what am I doing differently? Or what am I doing wrong? Why are people, and hopefully it won't end up in the other extreme where you get arrested or you get, pulled over by the police for something stupid that you've done that's completely out of sync with, with the rules and the laws here. So I hope that most visitors here, observe that this is an observant country, and yes, there's lots of freedom here. But at the same time, safety is one of the top values here, and security is. And you notice, people go to coffee shops, they leave their laptops, their expensive iPhones on the table, and nothing happens. So if you want to keep that going, you've got to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So road security is a very serious thing. And I think they spent a lot of money here on keeping the roads secure. And I'd like to think newcomers can also adjust to that and help contribute to that, as opposed to being part of the problem.
Yeah, I love that, because, in UAE here, there's an environment where people are naturally conditioned to do good, right? Mm-hmm. To understand that we're all here to have a safe life, whether it's on the road or off the road. And people naturally, get accustomed to that. Where in other countries, sure, there is a bit of safety, but it's more like there are, police protocols, or there are all these things that ensure things are done. Yes. And it's not necessarily by the people, right? Now I want to get into teenage drivers. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they are the most at-risk group. What have you seen as some of the patterns that lead to unsafe driving by teenagers?
So I remember when I was a teenager, I was really, really keen on getting behind the wheel of a car. We used to practice off-road sometimes in faraway places from any human beings or any other cars. And I understand nowadays, I've been to a few schools talking about safety, and the current wave of teenagers seem to also be very keen and interested in driving. The majority of them are. So what was the question again?
What are some of the behaviors or habits that lead to unsafe driving by teenagers?
So again, as teenagers, they tend to be a little bit hormonal, they're in a phase of growth, so they're out there trying new things. They see that advancement in their schools, in their studies, and in sports is sometimes through being adventurous and being risk takers. So that's a dangerous attitude to take into driving, because on the one hand, yes, you want to be brave, maybe in overcoming yourself or mastering yourself while driving, but you don't want to be brave in terms of overspeeding or testing the limits of your car, or checking how soon or how long it takes to brake from 100 kilometers an hour. So it's we ask a lot of teenagers, obviously, and they are at a phase of learning, so we want their learning to be as safe as possible. We need to give them experience, because no matter how good the driving school is, the experience that people gain after getting their license is crucial to making them safe drivers. It's the maybe 2-3 years after, or even the 10 years after. I mean, I've been driving now 25 years, and I still adapt my driving. I still learn new things in some days, and I still learn how to do things better in certain ways. So it's a never-ending process. So maybe making it clear to teenagers that this is the case, that it's not a case of you have your license now, that means you're a qualified safe driver. It just means you've begun your journey of collecting experience to keep you safe and your friends and your family through the years. So I think we need to make that message crystal clear to teenagers as we hand them the responsibility of cars and driving.
Yeah. I know, like, our generation, when we started driving, it was a milestone, right? Because there weren't a lot of cool things that we're able to do, but getting your driver's license and to get into drive. I remember when I was the first out of all my friends to start driving, and I remember just feeling like I'm on top of the world, right? Like coming to school with the music on, and you just feel like you're so cool. In today's world, it's a totally different dynamic, right? There's social media. There are so many other things that kids do today to kind of show their, existence. Now, cars is, of course, still one of them, because I can see my son constantly pushing us to get his license and to drive and all that stuff. But at the same time, when you see teenagers together, like, whether it's on the basketball court or at school, you just see, like, this rowdy bunch all over the place, and not necessarily that concerned about rules and regulations, things like that. But now if you think about it, now that same group, if they're now getting a car, well, there needs to be a certain level of responsibility.
Yes.
There needs to be a certain level of care, right? Of accountability in that. How as parents can ensure that our kids understand that, hey man, like, yeah, it can be fun and cool to be in a car, but it could also be deadly.
Yes, I mean, peer pressure is a very real thing, and students, I think, are subjected to it very early on in the school years. And I think parents probably catch on early to how their child responds to peer pressure. Are they asking to go to crazy adventures? Are they easily swayed by when their friends do X, Y, Z? Do they do the same thing? Do they always want the same stuff? So it's very normal when there's a fad going on in school or a certain time of year for kids to want to jump on the bandwagon and join their friends. So I think if we train our, let's say, children, I'm very fortunate. I'm the father of two daughters who are now 11 and 14. And I notice when there are things like mobile phones or things like social media where they want what their friends have or they want what their... so I think if we teach them how to handle that in a kind of a healthy way, how to set boundaries, how to be a responsible person regardless of what people around them are doing, then I think that's a very good start to teaching them to remain responsible throughout their life, because it's a case of, I think, life is going to teach teenagers and people in general anyway, whether you learn it at school, whether you learn it with your parents, whether you learn it in your own adventure, hiking somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you are going to get that experience, that responsibility is important, that only you can kind of control for your safety and your environment. So it's my hope that we message people early on. I mean, I really hope that we can also get it into schools, this kind of safe traffic curriculum, because if we start them early on, then it's a much easier task. And when I was talking at some of the schools, I noticed the kids tell on their parents, they're like, yeah, my dad or my mom does X, Y, Z while driving. So they know it's an unsafe thing. They know it's a behavior that's, and they notice. So I'm hoping that with more common sense, it'll be much easier to raise a whole generation that's more aware, more safe, and it becomes a culturally unacceptable thing to be unsafe behind the road, because you're endangering yourself and everybody else. So it's just, yeah.
Yep. And do you think that the current systems that we have in place, say driving schools, they do good enough job to educate kids about these safety measures?
Well, driving schools have come a long way since the days I got my license. I mean, back in the 90s, there was a case of, you put 3-4 people in the car and you go around for a few minutes, and then next, it was a very basic thing, whereas nowadays it's much more structured. There's much more technology. There's a curriculum. There's more theory lessons and so on. So I think it's come a long way since then. Mm-hmm. But I still think we need to emphasize to new drivers this issue of experience and the importance of gaining experience while you drive and not pushing yourself until you're capable. So I've got some comments I get on some of the Instagram reels I do. Some people say, I didn't feel confident enough after getting my license, so I went and paid extra for some extra lessons until I felt confident enough that I could drive in the areas I wanted. So some people have that sense of self-responsibility. They do that themselves. And some people maybe discover through their insurance premium or through their repair bill on their cars that actually I need to improve my way of driving.
Yeah. You've launched Road Hero Academy. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you felt that it was necessary?
So Road Hero Academy has been a journey. I mean, I've been thinking of ways that ever since I joined my first government job here to spread the message of awareness and safety to people, to the greatest number of people possible. So Road Hero Academy is, I think, a major step in that direction, because it opens up, a way of distilling all my 25 years of car experience, driving experience, safety experience, research, accident investigation, into key messages that people can take away in a very easy manner. It's a very short course, very lightweight. And there's also an ebook that goes along with it. which I encourage again, everybody new to driving in the UAE to read it, or anybody in general new to driving, because there are things in there that apply to people outside Dubai as well. It's not just about driving in Dubai. So it's a way to get the message out to the largest audience possible. And it's something I'm very passionate about. And it's something because you keep seeing the same patterns repeating year after year, you know, the same types of crashes, the same causes, the same. So human beings, I think they keep forgetting, or they just are not aware that, you know, we're all repeating this pattern over and over. So I'd like to think it's a way to get the message out there, and it's a work in progress. So let's see what it leads to.
Yeah, and is this something where only the kids benefit from who are about to drive, or it's also for the parents?
Well, it's a very the messages are very universal. So I think they benefit people at any age of driving. Even if you're a 50-year-old who's just decided I'm going to practice my driving privileges now, you know, or if you're a parent who wants to get, you know, these messages across to your teenage children, or if it's somebody who's maybe had a crash and lost the confidence to drive. A lot of the times, you know, when people have, especially their first crash, and most of them are minor, by the way, the confidence gets shaken in a way that's much bigger than the actual, you know, crash impact was. So a lot of the time you need that little nudge to get you back on the road, this reassurance that, you know, things, generally speaking, what happened to you is a very rare event.
Yeah.
And these are the steps A, B, C that you can take to make sure that it never happens again.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, you know, as someone who's gone through it, you know, one thing I notice is that, yes, there are tips, and yes, there are strategies which are great. But if I had to think of it from like a teenager's perspective, I had to say, all right, what would they really get out of this? And I think the stories in the book that demonstrate some of the key points that you're trying to highlight, I felt like that would resonate with them, especially, you know, as you mentioned, even the way we started this, the high schooler that was one day, you know, the guy with the nicest car, and then another day, everybody's praying their funeral. And I think it's a book that sinks in a bit of reality for kids without having to experience it themselves. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The stories. I mean, the storytelling is one of the most powerful ways of getting the points across, and that book has a lot of stories, and the course does as well. And it's I mean, the police files hold a lot of wisdom. You know, the hospital files hold a lot of wisdom for people who are actually willing to go and see it. And you don't have to be a researcher, you don't have to be a specialist to get that. And I think maybe I'll develop these stories more and more to break them down so that they can be more accessible to people, so that perhaps that's one of the ways that they can learn and become better drivers.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Mustafa, as someone who's been involved in the road and traffic arena for quite some time, what would you want your legacy to be?
I'd really like to see a day where every journey is completed. So nobody leaves their home or whatever work and does not reach their destination. So I'd really like to see the day where that happens, where every single journey, whether it's in Dubai or somewhere else, is actually a completed journey. So and I think it's doable. It's completely doable, and I don't think we need to wait till the day that the cars are all self-driving and autonomous.
I was like, okay, that might be the only way this is going to happen. We all have self-driving cars. I go in the car and I sleep, and then I'm like, hey, I'm here. But yeah.
So I'm hoping that that's doable in our lifetime. I hope before our kids grow too old, or we have grandkids or whatever it is. But I think it's doable, because right now we've reached numbers in terms of fatality rate or fatality risk that were unheard of 20 years ago. So back when we started this research, it was really like unheard of to get such low let's say fatality numbers or accident numbers in such a big population. So we've already achieved something that's amazing. And as Sheikh Mohammed says, he always wants to be number one. So I think we've got the thing to teach the world here. If we can manage to do it here, everybody has got their eyes, on Dubai, and Absolutely. Then it's something that could spread to other cities around the world.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have two more questions, but in between, I want to do a quick rapid fire round. So, but I'll ask you the first one now. If there's one message that you can send to every driver, young or old, what would that message be? I'd
say leave a safe distance. Keep some space around you. There's time is a key to reaction.
Yeah.
There's no way for you to react if you're stuck so close to the person in front, or you can't see a foreign object on the road, or so it's so easy to leave more space around you. So that's number one tip. If one thing you want to change right now, is do that and see how you're driving.
Good, because I'm glad my wife is not here, because she would tell you I'm one of the worst at that. You know, I have a saying that I say, like, I got things to do, I got places to go, and I try to sometimes be a little too close. All right, so let's do maybe like 3-4 rapid fire question, then I'll ask you the final question that we ask all of our guests. First car you ever drove? Let's see if you remember this.
This was a Mercedes 280 GE. So this was a G-Wagon back before they were fancy.
Okay.
It was more the kind of military version. It was a manual transmission, stick shift.
Yeah.
And I was so proud to be able to get going without stalling the first time, because it's very common with a manual and a clutch to stall. So I was very proud that I managed to get it up and running. But it was a very, very rough car.
Mercedes though.
Yeah, an 80s Mercedes was very different to a modern Mercedes. You could hear it coming half a mile down the road. Yeah.
I had a 1987 Chevy Nova.
Wow.
One day I drove it in the middle of a blizzard.
Wow.
How I'm still alive till today, like if people are like, what's one moment that you thought that was it? That was it, especially going down the hill one time. But favorite stretch of the road in UAE?
I'd say in the middle of the desert, when there's nothing around you. It's just you and the sand, and there's no distractions. It's really, I think, peaceful out there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one safety rule you wish everyone followed, I guess, safe distance.
And distraction. Yeah.
Less distraction.
Focused driving. We need to remove the word distraction from our vocabularies and just say focused driving. When you get behind the wheel, that's the only thing you're doing.
So off this question, but do you feel that now that we have all these things that beep and blink when we're close to other cars, kind of give us this thing like, I can be unsafe because I know that if I get too close, I'll get a trigger, right? Or does it actually make you a better driver?
The car will drive itself,
right? Because sometimes when I back up, I'm like, okay, I'm not hearing anything yet. Maybe I'm good, or maybe I just hit somebody, then I'll know. But
it's making us more complex. I think we're in a stage, we're in an in-between phase where technology hasn't evolved so far as to make us rely on it, safely, but it's still getting there. But I'm hoping that mobile phones and designers of operating systems are going to catch up soon. And there'll be a way that, as soon as you step into a driving environment, your phone goes silent. That's it. You're not allowed. You no longer can be distracted by anything, because technology is now conspiring against your distraction and making you focus more.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Manual or automatic?
I'd say automatics are pretty good nowadays. I mean, I still love the thrill of driving a manual, but I think automatics are really, they are the future. I think a manual is on the way out.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever driven manual in my life, even though I did work at ballet for some time. And then last question. For everybody watching the show, and they too want to be the best at what they do and achieve their own freedom and follow their passion, what advice would you give them?
Well, you've got to be consistent. You've got to allow yourself to quote unquote fail sometimes, because being obsessed with perfectionism and thinking that you've got the plan and only this plan works is a bit of a non-starter. I've learned later in life. So if you can make sure you keep going, doing is more important than having a perfect plan and sticking to it, because life happens to everybody, and you've got to adapt to it as it happens, and great things unfold from these happenings in your life. Absolutely.
Dr. Mustafa, it's been a pleasure having you, and I just want to say that this is I know not a lot of people talk about it. It's not that exciting, but it's one of the most important topics that I see today on social media: how to be safe, how to drive safe, how to ensure our kids learn the right habits as they get on the road. So thank you for doing it, and wish you
very much for having me.
The most success, and looking forward to see how you continue to evolve and keep our roads safer year by year.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.